All right. All right. Now I am live, it says. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to give it a few seconds here because I know there's a little bit of a delay. But I am coming to you today from West Palm Beach, Florida, where my husband and I live as often as we come here, as often as we can get away with. It's absolutely beautiful outside. I hate to tell some of you who I know are in snow and out in California and like tons of rain. I'm a Californian, homegrown and born and raised there, but it's 86 degrees here. So hi everyone. Some of you may remember that the last time I came out with a book was 2020, March of 2020. Can any of you remember what else happened in March of 2020? Because I can. Literally the day I came out with my last book, the world closed down. We had a book party that night, and then everybody was told they can't leave their house. So much for my book tour. But what I did instead is I did a ton of Facebook Lives, and so many of you joined me. Hey, here's Ruth. Ruth, I wish I could say your last name, Zavatsanos. I'm currently in Tampa area, going back to wintry Pennsylvania soon. So enjoy the sunshine. Yeah, I'm going back to Greenwich, Connecticut, to my home very soon too. Hey, Marty, I see you're on here. Marty, you're just such a great follower. Oh, wow, I miss your lives during the pandemic. That's right. That's when we did all this. Hi, Giacinta, if that's how you say your name, and Lisa Birnbaum. I love your hair. Oh, you're Debbie Bierman's bestie then you went to Ithaca College. Debbie Bierman was one of my half a dozen or so assistants over the years. And I'll tell you about them later because we all still stay close friends and get together. Hi, Roni Miller Schatz. Let's see, Anime Foley. Hey, Anime. I always hear from you all the time. Like you're one of the people who's like right there to comment on everything, and I appreciate that. You can't wait to read the new book. Okay, well, look here. I've got it right here, everybody. Oh, that's the back cover. So this is the front cover. And hi, Pam. You were on with me during the pandemic also? All right. And Sherry Rosenberg from Michigan. You know that my son Jack is at University of Michigan. And Linda Snyder. So Linda Snyder. So when you're going to read the book and you're going to find out I, at 16 years old, got on the ship that went around the world for something called World Campus Afloat. It still happens today. It's called Semester at Sea. And Linda Snyder was also on board with me. And through the world of social media and Facebook, it's really fun because we can like reconnect and reminisce. There's also a World Campus Afloat Facebook page, and we all share pictures from all of those stops around the world. So anyway, it's been a while since I've done this Facebook Live with you guys. And so now I have the 11th book coming out, Life Beyond the Script. And so I thought it would be fun to do this again and to also talk a little bit about the writing process, because a lot of people have asked me about it on my Facebook page. I have to tell you that while this is my 11th book, so obviously I've gone through this process a lot of times, I've never been more excited about a book. And I guess that's because this one's way more personal. It's my life story, and I think I allowed myself to dig a lot deeper in this book and tell stories that maybe I hadn't been so willing to tell up to this point. And it's obviously about my childhood and my parents and how they always gave me these positive affirmations. You can do anything you want. And my mother would say, hit your wagon to a star, sweetheart. And as I've read other people's memoirs, I've kind of learned that a lot of us who went far in life had those kinds of positive affirmations when we were young. And remember, they were giving these to me like in the early 60s, when it really wasn't a time when young women were encouraged to go out and set the world on fire. Guys were being encouraged to do that, but not necessarily females. And I guess I took it all to heart because I became pretty darn independent at a pretty young age. And I was really just dying to, like, spread my wings and go out and fly, even before graduating from high school. So I'd say that, this book is about all those factors that kind of shaped who I became as an adult, then how I navigated my adult life and big jobs, starting when I was still pretty young. I started when I was 23. Oh, here you go. This is me. Okay, right way back at the beginning. And I was only 27 when I started Good Morning America. So we're going to be opening this discussion today up to your questions. So definitely submit your questions, because I am joined today by one of my favorite people. She worked with me for over a year on this book. She's a memoirist. That might be a new word to you. A book editor, a magazine contributor, Tamela Rich. So everybody say hi to Tamela, because she is coming to us today from, hi Tamela, from Charlotte, North Carolina. I think you have some of the not as nice weather down there.
We can see sunshine today.
Oh, good. So Tamela, when I first submitted this book to my publisher, Laura Morton, who I know is on right now and listening. Hi, Laura. And I'd written a lot of books with her, and she's now a publisher. So she's publishing this book. And when I first turned it in, she said, this draft is kind of like Joan Lunden reporting on Joan Lunden's life, which is more like an autobiography. And I think that your readers want you to take them into your life. So I'm going to introduce you to someone, and she introduced me to Tamela Rich. And I feel like I got a 1.5 year master's course in memoir writing. So why don't you start by just kind of explain to everyone what's the difference between an autobiography and a memoir?
A lot of it's marketing, honestly. I did a little tiny bit of research on this, and the last international best-selling book that was marketed as an autobiography was 1984 by Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
And then like the following year, most books became marketed as memoir. So it's what people resonate with now. They resonate with that word memoir because it has that root word memory, and that makes you feel like, oh, I'm gonna dig deep into her psyche. I'm gonna, and you did.
And style-wise, you just said the key words, dig down deep, because as I understand it, an autobiography is more of a compilation of all the things you've done in your life, which, for me turned out to be about 197,000 words. And it was a compilation of all the things that had happened in my life. Mm-hmm. So it was a good starting point, because that gave us our timeline, and I fact-checked everything.
Yeah, you did.
So when I came to you, so talk about turning that into a memoir which is more like a novel, right?
Yeah, a memoir really relies on scenes. So, and I know that you worked for years on getting your life's timeline in order, and your assistants were keeping that up.
Yeah.
Gosh, when you were still at GMA, they were documenting every interview, every time your kids lost a tooth, for all I know. They really kept it going.
It's an amazing archival timeline that I didn't even realize till years later, that the very first assistants, who I think is on today, Elise Silvestri. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Elise.
Who came to me as an intern when she was in college, and then right about the time she graduated, I became the host of Good Morning America. She started with me, and neither one of us knew what we were doing. And on top of that, I was coming in with a brand new baby. But we'll get to all of that. But they started keeping that timeline. I don't know if I would have had the ability to do the book the way it turned out in the end if I hadn't had that timeline. And even with the timeline, I would sometimes say, okay, that's when I broke my arm. But when did that happen? It was right as the Republican convention was going on. And I'd go to Google I've never Googled so much. When was the Republican convention in Atlanta? And every time I could fact check something and find out exactly when it was, then it helped us write.
Well, and your journalistic
Wait, I hear questions coming in. At least
your journalism training really served you well, right?
I can help questions. Joan, I remember you from Good Morning America in 1982. Mason Krangle, I remember you at Sacramento State. Woo, woo, woo. Now, Elise says, what did you learn about Joan that you didn't expect? So what was
me?
that?
That's the question of me? Oh, yeah. So, here's the thing. I grew up watching GMA. Like in the day, you were either an NBC, a CBS, or an ABC household. That's what we were. And I watched Joan every morning on GMA. And so she made everything look so simple. And I thought, I was in college. I remember thinking, because I married my college sweetheart. So I was in college and I was thinking, you know what? If we get married, having kids will be a piece of cake. Joan Lunden's on TV doing it all the time.
I did that to you.
I mean, I was so stupid, but that's what I thought. If Joan Lunden can be on TV every day and have 3 children, I can do it too. No. Anyway, and so one of the things that I was surprised to hear about you is how you're like that duck that swims, and looks so graceful on the top, but you revealed in the book, how much was going on under the surface. And, and another thing that I really appreciate as a woman of a certain age is that the studio or the network, you were novel in many ways, right? And coming to work with a baby was just one of them. But what they hadn't figured out is they sort of thought that would be a liability. And the first day they said, we're not talking about the baby. We're not talking about the baby. But that's what everybody wanted to talk about. Everyone wanted to talk about baby Jamie. Yeah, and you gave them so much press from being a mom on TV.
But it was supposed to be the best kept secret. That's what they anticipated it would be. Like, okay, we'll let you bring the baby in, and here's a little room right next to your dressing room where you can put her. And I think we actually have a picture of that. And then, when they did the press conference on day one, every single member of the press only wanted to know how ABC was allowing me to bring my little baby to work. So here we go. Here she is. This is like a typical day in my office when I first started getting ready for an interview. There's Elise when she was, I don't know, maybe 20 or something like that. Hairdresser, kind of pripping my hair, and little Jamie just hanging out there in her little chair thing on my desk. And when the cameras would roll and the interview would start, Elise would scoop Jamie out of that and she would go walk her around the office. And Jamie became like the little mascot almost of the office. And, Elise used to say, it's really interesting because I can go into a room where everybody's really stressed out because they can't get this booking. They're trying to get this person. And I go in with Jamie oohing and cooing. It's like, she settles everybody down. It's like everybody goes, oh.
And you got baby booties, you got packages, you got letters.
Oh my God.
Your girls were everybody's girls.
The baby gifts I got were just unbelievable. Hand knitted crochet little sweaters, handmade little leather booties. I mean, it was unbelievable. It's almost like when somebody is on a sitcom and they get pregnant and the people think that person actually is pregnant, except that they're not. But, right from the get-go, by letting the cat out of the bag, I had no choice because as soon as we did the press conference, that's all everyone wanted to talk about it became very evident that the big story of the day was that a major media outlet was letting a female bring a baby to work. And I think it made me bond with the audience so much faster because they realize, oh, she's there, she showed up, she's knows what she's doing, she's she's prepared for this interview, but we know she also is dealing with like spit up and dirty diapers.
You actually have some funny stories about being a breastfeeding mom and managing TV.
So, oh wait, just a few people are saying, no surprise that Jamie is so fun now to follow on Instagram as well as on QVC, because she's on QVC. It's like every 18 minutes selling something. And here's my daughter, Sarah. She's the youngest of the older three. And she says, Jamie may have been the first, but they saved the best for last. Okay, Sarah.
I love that.
But what was I going to say?
Well, just about being a breastfeeding mother.
I'll tell this story. It's in the book, but I'll tell you guys now. So one morning, Jamie was like, I don't know, 3, 4 months old. And I was downstairs because all the dressing rooms are upstairs, inside the studio, sitting across from some senator. It was when Ronald Reagan was president. And this senator was explaining to me, about the trickle-down economic theory. Which you might remember that theory. But what I remember is that obviously it was time for Jamie to feed because all of a sudden I experienced inflation and trickle down. Like, sorry all you men who are out there, but as women know, like your boobs are like, and I wasn't even hearing her upstairs crying or anything. There must just be that unbelievable connection. And my hairdresser ran downstairs, and fortunately I had on it like a print silk blouse, so you didn't ever really see what happened, but he's like, okay, the show will go on with the hairdryer. And the show did go on.
You had a lot of funny stories in the book about funny things that happened on TV, starting in California. Tell the blue eyeshadow story.
All right. But before that, I'm just going to say, Marty, when I was pregnant in 1972, I had to give up my job at a bank as soon as I started a show because I worked with the public. Today that doesn't make any sense, but back then, and a little quick story, which I don't even think is in the book. When I really started a show, the head of the entertainment division, because our show was under ABC Entertainment, called the producers and said, you got to get Joan Lunden off the air, like now. And they're like, why? They said, because like nobody wants to see a pregnant woman walking down the street, let alone on their TV in the morning. And the producer said, that's not really the reaction that we're getting from the audience. The audience is responding really positively. And he got together with David Hartman and the vice president, and they stood up for me. And the guy finally let it go, and I stayed on the air till 2 weeks before delivery. So a recurring theme in the book, I think, is what Tamela is talking about, is that I came into the business at a time when there weren't that many women in the business. And the men actually didn't think we should be in the business. Because in the 70s, the women's movement had just kind of really blossomed in the 60s and was now steamrolling into the 70s, suing the FCC and newspapers and everything to put more women into jobs that mattered, including on the air. So that's when, a friend of the family suggested I go in and talk to, the news director at KCRA in Sacramento. So, and I could have just let that passing comment go because it was like, what? It almost seemed like kind of a harebrained idea, but I didn't. I picked up the phone the next morning. I called the news director and he said, oh, Bill, DeBlanc, who's down in sales, he told me you might call. And he told me that I should have you come in, that I would be impressed. So what are you doing at 2? So I went in, and ultimately he thought that I had what he called, the it factor, but he didn't have a job. But the weatherman was back behind the set and followed me out in the parking lot and said, there are a few stations around the country who are hiring weather girls. And I'd like to make you Sacramento's first weather girl, which sounded, by the way, completely uninteresting. I didn't know anything about the weather, but thank God I knew an opportunity and I said yes. And I worked my way up into being a consumer reporter very quickly. And they let me go out with the cameraman and shoot, vegetables and meats and dairy and everything because I was talking about food prices, what's going up. But they didn't tell me one thing. And that's that there's a blue screen behind the set so that when they roll the film, there was no videotape back then. They roll the film of the tomatoes and the eggs and the milk. The whole idea of blue screen is that it doesn't see anything that's blue. Anything that's blue has the footage running, which means that every time I look down, remember, no judgment here. It was the 70s and we all wore blue eyeshadow. But every time I looked down at my script, because there was no teleprompter back then, everybody would see tomatoes or lettuce. And the reporters upstairs who wondered who was this blonde girl that just like walked in off the street and got a job, they would practically be peeing in their pants, laughing so hard. And they all promised each other not to tell me so that it would keep happening. It was a long time before they finally told me.
Oh my God. It's a lot of, you put up with a lot of that kind of.
Oh my God. I mean, they used to write copy for me that would intentionally try to trip me up. And I'd come back. I remember at WABC in New York, I would come back into the newsroom and sometimes I'd come back from the studio and a writer would be saying, made your way through that copy, didn't you? Like, so you knew that it wasn't, that it was intentional.
Yeah.
Here's Lori saying, blue eyeshadow, great story. All right, so my publisher wants us to get down to business here. Laura is saying, tell them about the QR codes. So when I started doing this book and I started looking for pictures, there are a lot of pictures in the book, I think like 100 or so. I mean, how do you not have that many pictures? It's your whole life. But I thought about it and I thought ever since I'm like 23, pretty much my whole life is on video. Well, earlier film, but it was all transferred to video. I wonder if I could put video in a written book. So I called my attorney. I said, can I put QR codes throughout the book that would open up to the video? And he said, as long as you own it. I said, I don't own it, but it's all on YouTube. And I don't even know how it all got there. And he said, all right, so I'm going to show you something. All right, here we go. Let me turn the sound up on my phone. And so all throughout the book, so the first chapter, and I'll tell you how we came to write this first chapter the way we did, you'll see a QR code. See it right there? These are all throughout the book. So all I have to do is put my phone right over the QR code, or if you're actually reading the book, you just click on it and you open it up.
Sacramento Pinion 7-1 declared an emergency.
That's Joan right there.
That's me.
Malfunction and an electrical malfunction. I've got about 2 hours of fuel on board, 2 souls on board.
So I'll stop it there. You don't need to hear the whole thing. So I think this is one of the coolest things about the book. I mean, I'm gonna tell you about my first day at GMA, and you can go right to that QR code. And it's like, hi, I'm Joan Lunden, and this is my baby daughter, Jamie. I mean, these things are all throughout the book.
Yeah.
So let's start though with why that flight.
Why that's the open. Why that's the open.
Flight in a U-2 spy plane at 75,000 feet above the Earth, at the edge of the Earth's atmosphere. Why did I open the book with that? So in my very first draft, I did the obvious. You're going to learn though that from then on, I very rarely do the obvious. I do it beyond the script. I do it my way.
Absolutely.
So I thought, yeah, but most books start with childhood. And that is how I did the first draft. I started like at childhood. then I remembered I read someone else's memoir, another very, very renowned female journalist. And I remembered reading her memoir. And in the beginning, it was all about her family from overseas and all this. And I ended up putting it down and I never even finished the book. And I thought, shouldn't I learn from that? And then I thought, so what really intrigues me about storytelling? So now I'll tell you that I'm a huge Law and Order fan. I mean, besides liking Mariska Hargitay. Why? Because they always start with a scene and life's just going on, la-di-da, la-di-da. And then there's that, oh my God moment, the jogger in Central Park that sees the dead body, or somebody coming and they see a crime being committed. And then it's like, oh my God. And then they go to the open of the show, commercial. They come back and they start somewhere before that, oh my God moment, because they have to work up to it. And I thought, I love that. So why couldn't I do the same thing with a book? So I started with that. And Tamela, you're the one that came up with which story I should start with. And the reason
Yeah.
why, because
Laura was our matchmaker, your publisher. She interviewed me first, and I read the manuscript. And before she introduced us, I said, I have this idea for how to start the book. And it was with that U2 episode, never knowing, because I hadn't met you, that you were looking for such an entry point to the book. And so it was kismet. Thank you, Laura.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is that I don't want to give away too much of the book, but there is a recurring theme of flying.
There is.
Throughout the book. My dad was a doctor, a cancer surgeon, but also a very avid private pilot. So I grew up flying all over in an airplane. In fact, I lived in a house that was built around an airplane hangar. It was like a fly-in ranch, and you just took Dad would open up those doors and put this little thing and like pull the plane out, and we'd get in and start it up. We'd taxi out to the runway and we'd take off and go wherever. So, and I've continued to fly in all kinds of aircraft.
That's the truth. And tell your audience about what your dad told your mom when they were considering marriage about flying.
He told her that she had to get her pilot's license. And she had to go take the lesson. She had to get a pilot's license because he said, otherwise, so many women say, oh, yeah, we love flying. But then once they get married, they say, oh, it's too dangerous. I don't want you to fly. He said, I want you to be my co-pilot in the air as well as my co-pilot in life.
Can we all just give that some big love? Big love. Yeah, I love your dad.
And
love that.
So she did. And she got her pilot's license, and they flew all over the place. I mean, they really, and I think part of that is what gave me that kind of that desire for adventure and to travel and to see the world. And my mom was really the one that came up with the idea because you'll learn when you read the book that I kind of skipped a grade or two, and I went to college when I was 16, and it was the 1960s, which was kind of a wild time on American campuses. I think 1967 was my first year in college, and it was actually coined the year of free love or something like that. My mom was like, I don't really care if you applied to Stanford and UC Berkeley and UCLA, you're not going to any college campus. And she said, I found this thing. It's called World Campus Afloat, and you're going to get on a ship and you're going to go around the world and study while you're on the ship. And her friends all said, what are you, crazy? You just sent your 16-year-old around the world? She said, yeah, but she's on a ship. There's such...
What can happen on a ship?
No, but there's so much oversight on that ship, while we were on the ship and in port. She was right, but she was way more right. She said to me, I want you to broaden your horizons. That was one of her favorite sayings. And boy, did she. Because that was my introduction to the world. And And one of the other girls on the ship, she said, "What are you gonna do when we dock? We left New York and came around to the world to LA." And she said, "I'm gonna go to Mexico City and go to a school down there." And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I'll go too. So I applied and I got in, and then I got to LA. My mom flew me down to LA because she lived in LA. We were going to get on the plane in LA and go to Mexico together. And when I called her, she said, "I'm so sorry, but I'm backing out." I was 17 now. I turned 17 on the ship. And my mom was like, "Now what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm still going, of course." And I went for 3 months and stayed 3 years.
Yeah.
Um,
And I just want to highlight about that you left as a girl and came back as a woman. I mean, you didn't have a cell phone. Your mom didn't have you on the Find Me
oh, yeah.
app. You had to go somewhere to get to a phone. Oh, but tell the story about your mom pulling up in that car that she got for you.
Are
It
you
was the orange one.
Are you talking about when I did acrobatics on a car?
No, when you were in Mexico City, and she brought you a car, the
No,
orange
no, I went back home and I got that car. That was a Firebird, a bright orangey red Firebird, and she got another person that I'd gone to high school with, who was a guy, to drive down with me and cross the border and get back to Mexico City, and then we flew him home because it was still 1968 maybe then, and she just wanted a man in the car. He was, and he had been a friend in high school, because that was back in the day that if you're a female, you couldn't possibly do that alone, could you? It was a different time.
It was a different time, but you were a different person too. And that started, I do want to go, I know we've got a picture. You talk in the book about how much confidence you gained from something kind of surprising. When you were little, your mom put you in dancing and baton classes. And you talk in the book about how important that was. Let's tell them that.
And the reason why, so here I am. And so you see the car behind it, that's a Ford Fairlane 500. And that was a car that existed for a short time, that it had a hard top, but you pushed a button and the trunk opened up and the hard top went down into the trunk and then it closed. So my dance instructor kind of plucked me out of the majorette lineup and constructed this gold wood platform that went over the top of the open area of the car, just what left a little space out so he could sit there and drive the car. And I did acrobatics on a moving car. So they had little handles so I could do cartwheels or whatever and not fall off while it was moving. And I got a trophy in every parade because there was not anything else in my category. Like, where do we put her? She's not a majorette. But all of those things and doing dancing lessons, and those are things that when you get to be a newscaster, they're held against you.
I wanted you to tell that story. Yeah.
They are held against you. You were in a beauty contest? Yeah. Another thing my mom suggested. In fact, she suggested I dye my hair brown because she had always watched Miss America contest. She said, blondes never win. The brunette always wins. So I did it and I won. And the first runner-up was a blonde. Sometimes your mother's just always right. But those are the kinds of things that were our only outlet back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
To be putting ourselves out there in front of an audience and gaining confidence doing that. We weren't being put on the football field, to get all the accolades because our team won. I mean, boys had a lot of opportunity to kind of find ways to gain self-confidence and to be told all the time, you're the best, go on, show them you're the best. And, it's so much better today, but it was almost non-existent back then. And what did little girls do? They took dancing lessons and we marched in parades and we were in ballet recitals and we were in beauty contests. And we didn't think of it as something that was going to be held against us and criticized. And boy, when I started GMA, the critics, I mean, they hunt back, and it's like, they made her, this baton twirler was made into a newscaster overnight. Makes for
Yeah.
great copy, but it's just so unfair and so untrue.
Yeah.
Because those things are important when you're a little girl.
Yeah.
And
So,
we looked for those. Okay, so I want you to tell them what postcards are, because we looked for them.
oh, yeah.
Because
I saw a question earlier. Somebody was saying, how did you choose what
Okay.
to include?
I saw that too. How did you decide what to include and what not to include?
Yeah.
And there were all these things in that first draft, but if you're going to open up certain ones and set the scene and take you inside my head, and how did this happen, and what was I thinking, and how vulnerable I was in the moment, well, you have to drop like 5 other stories that are all good in your mind, but you can't have them all in, because they want you to try to say it 100,000 words. That's kind of, and even that's a little high, but it is kind of a long book. And so every time we'd come to one, and I'd say, well, I like this story, and she would say, it's a postcard. So what's a postcard?
A postcard is lovely to look at. It's really interesting, but there's no depth to it. I saw this thing, I went to this place, I had this interesting meal. But what you did is you went deep where it needed to be deep, where it revealed your character. You weren't just tripping through your life, sending your readers postcards that, I saw a lovely such and such here and there. You were saying how it changed you, and how it informed decisions that you made down the road. And there's no fluff in this book. There's plenty of laughs, plenty of tears, but there's no fluff. This is all a deep character study of Joan Lunden.
This editor took out anything that was fluff, or anything that was just a postcard that didn't have some kind of a revelatory.
Well, I mean, it's your book. I said that a million times. It's your book. You get to make the final call, but I think this is a postcard.
So we have several people asking, am I coming to Phoenix? Hi, Stephanie Stock. I don't know if Phoenix is on the book tour yet, and somebody else asked about Chicago. And yes, I am actually going to be in Naperville, which is right by Chicago, as any of you there know that, on April 6th at Anderson's Books. Now, if you guys want to know where all I'm going to be, because a lot of people are asking if I'm coming to their town, if you go to joanlunden.com, don't do it right now, stay with us. But afterwards, go to joanlunden.com, and if you haven't gotten the book yet, that's one of the places you can pre-order the book, as a pop-up, and you can just order it, and you can choose where you want to order it from. And otherwise, you can also support our independent bookstores, because I love bookstores and I don't want them to go away. But that appearance schedule, if you don't see your city, don't despair, because it literally changes like every few days, as I'm called by the PR team who's handling the whole book tour. And will you go to this place? Will you go to this place? So I think it only goes through May also. And there are places come around the other end in fall. I don't think that's been added yet. So you can check it out there to see if I'm coming to your to your city. I want to talk also, though, about several people just asked, how long did it take you to do this? Mm-hmm. So I can definitely tell you that I started working on this at least 11 years ago. And why do I know that? Because I was working on it, and I really got kind of the timeline and everything started falling into shape. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer in June of 2014. So, I put it aside, because I was, totally involved for a year in my treatment. And I always thought it was going to be great, because I was going to have to be lying around and I could read. You don't even necessarily feel like reading. It's really tough, I went through really, really potent chemotherapy. And I ended up wanting to share my story, as I have done all throughout my life. If you go back through the 11 books, when I lost a lot of weight, I shared my story. When I left Good Morning America, I did Bend in the Road is Not the End of the Road. When I had breast cancer, we wrote, Laura Morton wrote with me, Had I Known. And so then after that was all done, I was going to take it back up. And at that point, I was doing so many breast cancer luncheons and 5Ks. And I was just like, that sent me on like a 3-year whirlwind tour, which was great because I decided in like the first probably 24 hours after my diagnosis that, oh my God, I always wanted to be a doctor, which you'll learn if you read the book. I wanted to be just like my dad. I wanted to be a doctor. And then I went to work in a hospital for a few months right before college. And I found out pretty quickly that scalpels and stitches were not going to be part of my long-term life. And I always kind of feel like I let that go and I didn't live up to that legacy of my dad's that I wanted to carry on. And now here I got diagnosed with breast cancer, and he was a cancer surgeon. And I thought, you just got a gift dropped in your lap. Like you can go out, you can take a camera into every appointment you go on. You can learn as much as you possibly can about breast cancer and share it with other women. We actually started a website called Alive with Joan. Now that's kind of incorporated into my joanlunden.com now. But it allowed me to instantly become an advocate, a warrior and an advocate fighting for the lives of other women, as opposed to being a patient or like a victim or, woe is me. So it changed my cancer journey like in the most wonderfully profound way. But it also put me out in front of women's groups, and I got the itch to write a book about women and aging. And so I set this book aside and I wrote this other book, which some of you may have read. It's called Why Did I Come Into This Room? A candid conversation about aging and women. It's by far my funniest book because you can't talk about leaky bladders and hot flashes without doing it with humor. And then after I finished that book, and of course it came out the day the world closed down, and then I took up this book again. And I think we started working on this, I think you told me earlier today. And
late October of 24 is when we started. And then we had to get the first thorough draft in by March 30th, and we beat it by a week, let the record show.
Yeah, we met
and then we got our first round of edits back in early April, and then we had to get it turned around for the big copy edit in June, and we made that deadline, of course. Joan, let me tell you guys, Joan has a fabulous work ethic. I've worked with lots of people, and I can say that when you're Joan Lunden, you could choose to just phone it in. Everybody wants to read a book by Joan Lunden, right? But she did not do that. She has the best work ethic. I tell all my clients when they write a book, read every word aloud. Don't turn it in until you've read every word out loud. Nobody does that, but Joan Lunden did. And you narrated the audiobook, of course, too.
Yeah.
But when you do that, and Jeff, bless him, your husband Jeff, listened to you read the whole thing. You guys are a great team.
Yeah,
anyway.
John Feeney right now is saying, did Jeff help you with your book? No.
He listened.
But when it was all done, I said, will you listen to the book? And I read him the entire book out loud.
Yeah.
And he had some incredibly astute comments, really good comments.
Yeah, so that's so important. She really put the work in, and you checked every comment. I remember when we got back the first PDF of the whole book, and you'd be like, "Ooh, we need to tighten up that's a widow there." I mean, you were meticulous about how this book was going to turn out. It was a joy to work with someone who really cares as much as you do.
And I think you appreciate the fact that I said, this can't just be about all the fabulous things that happened in my life, because frankly, most of those have gotten shared. I need to include the vulnerable times.
Yeah.
And how I got through them. I want to include, I mean, I'll tell you, we included what I call the kind of dark side of celebrity.
Yeah.
And the fears that come with that. And I have a chapter, I forget what this one was.
Life in the Fishbowl?
Life in a Fishbowl.
Yeah.
And, I dealt with stalkers,
Yeah.
having to have attorneys go to prisons to keep these people who were threatening my life and sometimes my daughter's lives. I mean, you become this mama bear, and like I have to send attorneys to protect myself from them. And then about protecting my children, I also had another fear that because they were raised during this time in my life where it was all about being carted around in limos and being on red carpets and just the amount of adulation, just going out to dinner. We would go out to dinner and, people kind of caught your eye like, oh, I know who you are. And invariably, as they would leave the restaurant, they'd come by the table and they'd stop and they'd talk and like, oh, I'm such a fan. And these are your girls. Are you the ballet dancer or are you the horseback rider? Which was weird to them that these people, we went to a Broadway show one time and we were walking down the aisle and a couple of older women came out and said, oh my God, here's you're the ballet dancer, you're the horseback rider. And I knew you girls before you were born. I knew them because I saw them in your mommy's tummy. We sat down in our chairs and I remember Jamie looked at me and said, that was just kind of weird. But, because I was on a morning show, like you can be on a primetime show and if you're walking down the streets of New York and you saw Mariska Hargitay or some other star of the show, some show, you probably wouldn't walk over and say hi. Like you probably wouldn't. You'd see them from afar, but but with me, when you're on at 7 and 9 in the morning, it means that you're in people's houses when they just got up, they maybe have their slippers on and their pajamas, they haven't combed their hair, maybe they didn't brush their teeth yet. The kids are running around like little banshees. They wouldn't invite their best friend over. And you're there in their home. So I always felt like there was a familial, not a familiar bond, a familial, because that you were in their house at such a personal time that it was, people sometimes reacted to me as though I was like, a cousin, a sister, a best friend, to this day, sometimes I'll walk down the street and someone will say, hi, but they'll say it in a way that only like a best friend would say it. And your first inclination is to say, oh, hi. And then you realize you do not know this person.
I want you to talk about a couple of things. First is, what was your coping strategy for keeping the girls safe while in magazines? This is a very good strategy.
So back then, the way I looked at it was that if I allowed a magazine to put them on the front cover of a magazine that would be on a newsstand on the street, I don't want to, any like pervert walking down the street could see their picture and get some kind of idea. But if I only allowed them to be on the inside of the magazine, that same person's not going to go and like shell out a couple bucks to buy Ladies Home Journal. So that was how, in my mind, I kind of always protected them. There were a couple of times where I allowed them to be on a cover, a parenting magazine, but that's because it wasn't sold on a newsstand. It was only through subscription. But, those are the kind of decisions that most people don't have to make, that you have to constantly make. And, as I said to Tamela at one point, I said, I have so many people that say, oh my God, you had such an amazing life. And I said, yeah, but that's because I said yes to every single opportunity that came my way.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure when you really think about it that you would have wanted to wake up every single morning at 3:30 a.m., sometimes earlier, for 20 years and have your entire life have to revolve around that and around a program's travel schedule and deal with all of the hard work. It's like there's nothing easy about that way of life, nothing. And the preparation that had to go into being ready for all the interviews the next day, um, and then, you know, and I said, and as far as all the other things I did, what my husband calls my stupid human tricks, all the adventures I did on behind closed doors, I said, do you think every time I drove out of my driveway and I had yet another uniform, Marines, U.S. Navy, Navy SEALs, whatever it was, packed in my suitcase, that I didn't say to myself, am I really going to be able to pull this off? Because I did say that, you know, I mean, however, I just never allowed that to be as big as doing the adventure. Like this one, this was, you know, in order to fly in the U-2 at 75,000 feet, you have to be in a spacesuit because you're at the edge of the atmosphere. And these are the spacesuits, by the way, that the very first astronauts wore. And I never knew I had claustrophobia until the day came where they put you in this outfit and they click on the gloves and then they put the helmet and you are ensconced inside a second skin, like a second container. And I remember then they sat us in these big easy chairs, and they do this thing where they pump the oxygen out of your body. It kind of goes through this thing because if you go up in the sky, you can get, I don't know, it's all in the book. And my crew was there shooting everything, and I could see them through this helmet. And they're going, but all I could hear was this. My own breathing. And I thought, am I really going to be able to pull this off? I don't know. I mean, first of all, I have to lie here for an hour before they even let us go out and get in the spacecraft. I mean, in the U-2. And that was probably the toughest thing I ever had to talk myself into being able to do. And I had to literally talk myself in. And the night before, I had a dream, and I dreamed the entire sequence. I usually did that. The night before, I would dream me doing this ridiculous, stupid human trick, whether it was jumping out of an airplane with the Golden Knights, or landing on an aircraft carrier, or whatever it was. I would dream it the night before. And figure out how I actually dreamed I was in the U-2. We had to actually eject, and then we both came down in with our parachutes. You know, you do this and your parachute comes up, and I did, you know, I stuck the landing. So it was ironic that the next day when we went up, we actually had a crisis on board. Obviously, the crisis was ended okay because I'm here, but you'll learn about that crisis in the book. And that's the only time I was seriously in danger.
What I want to make clear to the folks who are with us today is that this was your post-GMA life.
Oh, yes.
And that is a major theme in the book, is about reinvention and taking what life brings to you. It's beyond the script, etc. And so you had a show called
Behind Closed Doors, my favorite, my ticket to adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
and your favorite, I think I'm right when I say your favorite adventure on Behind Closed Doors was being a dancer in Las Vegas.
Well, maybe, I don't know if it was my favorite. I think my favorite was probably landing on an aircraft carrier, because I'm
okay.
adventurous in me.
But we don't have a picture of that. We do have a picture of you in Vegas.
It's crazy. I'm talking to you about all these things, like being in the U-2, having a crisis, laying on an aircraft carrier. I'm telling you, the scariest thing I ever did was being a showgirl on the Las Vegas stage in the Bally's Showgirl. And when my producers wrote to me and said, will you do this? And I said, sure. And they're like, do you know what we're asking you to do? When we're little kids, and you'll all remember this, you would say, watch me, mommy, watch me, watch me, watch me, watch me. We made up a dance. Watch us, watch us. we lose that when we grow up. And then we don't have that in us. And that is what I had to like somehow dig down in deep and resurrect as I stepped out onto that Las Vegas stage. Because I remember the person who was choreographing us said, you got to go out there and dance for the guy in the last row, way up there, the last row. And in essence, you have to be saying, watch me, watch me, watch me, as you're like, kicking your legs and you have like 35 pounds of jewelry on your arms and your head. That was, and as a female, taking that on and having to somehow banish from your mind that you might go out there and make an absolute fool of yourself. I mean, it's funny because I did one number that had this really tiny little skimpy outfit and had a lot of dancing. And then we got ready for this dance, which was in all this long red flowing thing that flowed behind me. And I watched the woman do it that actually did it in the show. And I thought, well, she's just really kind of walking around the stage. Like, how hard can that be? I can't flunk walking. And then I went out there and she said, the drums, and I think this video is in the book, will sound, and the music will sound, and the light will come on you, and you stand there and you command them to look at you. And I'll say, holy crap. I mean, and it turned out to be this really hard thing, but I was just walking around the stage, I mean, the other one, I had to remember all these steps. But that one behind closed doors was probably the hardest thing I ever did, which is really saying something. Since I deployed with the Army, the Navy, everything and we do a lot of those. I couldn't get all of those into the book because you wouldn't let me, because they were cards. So what I did, I told you I always get my way in the end. So at the end of the book, I really wanted them included. So you're going to find on page 381, for your viewing pleasure, and there's several pages of these QR codes and a little description, so you can see all my stupid human tricks and maybe like really big interviews that happened that just we couldn't fit into the book. Because just like right now it's 2:58 and I'm supposed to finish by 3. You can't get it all in, but damn, I tried.
Yeah. I really want people to know that there's a lot of joy, a lot of tears, deep introspection, and really inspiration for relaunching your life as many times as it takes.
Absolutely. And I also am supposed to remind you all, the pub date is March 3rd, which is getting really, really close. So that's the date that it'll be in bookstores. That's the date that all of you who have ordered it, you'll get it. And if you haven't gotten your order yet, you can go online and order it from wherever you get your books, or you can go to joanlunden.com. You can order it there. I also signed 1,000 that now Premier Collectibles has. So you can order through there a first edition autographed copy. And again, if you want to see if I'm coming to a town or city near you, you can go to joanlunden.com and hit appearances. And you can see it's an ever-growing list, but you'll see if I'm coming to your town. So thank you.
What's happening next week?
Oh, next week I'm going back from West Palm Beach to New York because I'm pre-taping the Tamron Hall show. And when I do that, that will play. So on March 3rd, I'm going to be on Good Morning America first. Then I'm going to be on The View. Then I'm going to be on GMA3. And then I'm going to be on Tamron Hall because they'll play that tape. And next week, right here, these are my older daughters. That's Sarah, Jamie, Lindsay, and me. We were all in Las Vegas watching a Bruno Mars concert, one of my favorite musicians. And they're going to be with me next Thursday at this time at 2:00. And I'm really excited because they've now read the book. I'm excited to hear what they're going to say. So thank you, Tamela,
Oh, my pleasure.
for everything. Yay! And if I hope you guys will join me again next Thursday at 2 o'clock. In the meantime, I'll see all of you on Facebook with all your comments, and I really appreciate you being part of my community and always, following me. So thank you, everyone.